Chapter 13, Sheephole Valley Wilderness. I had a lot of preferred areas throughout the walk, but my absolute favorite stretch was California State Route 62 through the Sheephole Valley Wilderness. After spending the night in Parker, Arizona, I got up early and crossed the California border, immediately hopping onto Highway 62. While it was a grueling area due to there being about 110 miles without any towns, places to restock on food, or refill water, I found it to be quite enjoyable in many ways. I split this section up into 3 days to ensure that I would have more than enough water to get through. That splits up into roughly 2 35-mile days and a 40-mile day. I figured this would be less exhausting than 3 37-mile days. I'm sure it was mostly in my head, but any extra miles that I walked past 35 in a day felt extra strenuous. The first thing I noticed as I hopped onto the highway after crossing out of Arizona was that there wasn't going to be much of a shoulder at all. There technically was one for a while, maybe 1.5 feet or 2 wide, but that only lasted a couple of miles. After that, there wasn't much of anything that I would consider to be a shoulder. Regardless, I hopped back onto the road, as far left as I could possibly be. One of the first few vehicles I encountered was a semi-truck. The driver seemed really upset about the situation, laying on his horn and throwing up his hands at me out of frustration. I learned early on in the walk to just smile and wave back. I wonder if this is how people in California were going to be the entire time. Like I said, I usually got a taste for how people would act in general as soon as I crossed the state line. This definitely ended up not being the case. For the most part, people just left me alone on this stretch. Within the first 15 or so miles, I passed through an agricultural checkpoint. I had personally never heard of one, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to go through it or not, since all the signs I had seen regarding the checkpoint mentioned all vehicles needing to stop. I went ahead and walked through. The employee checking vehicles was extremely kind, offering water if I needed to refill my jugs. I had planned ahead accordingly, so this wasn't necessary. She explained to me how they have people walking through this stretch all the time. The only other official of any sort I ran into along the rest of this stretch was the police officer, who simply checked to make sure I was still doing okay, and informed me of the emergency phones installed along the road if I were to need anything. Other than that, I was alone for the better part of 100 miles. I loved this period of solitude and freedom. At the end of the day, I could quite literally set up camp just about anywhere I wanted. After all, the landscape was just flat sand with some bush-like plants spaced out. The sights I saw were absolutely incredible. Being from Kansas, I thought I understood what a vast landscape was. I had grown up minutes from endless country views, but these were unlike anything I had ever seen before. The road was leading into the mountains in the distance. They almost looked fake, like looking out into the distance in a video game, due to how far away they were. There were no fences or signs of life either way looking north or south. I was truly in the middle of nowhere. It was one of those few moments I've had in my life that made me feel so small in comparison to something so grand, especially since I had to walk across the remaining tens of miles that I could clearly see the majority of. The most remarkable view I encountered, however, was the sunset on my first night out there. A significant amount of time had passed since I had thought the sun was supposed to set, but a glow of golden light continued to peek out from behind the mountains that lay many miles ahead. At some point, I turned my head to look behind me. I was shocked to see a bright, full moon surrounded by a night sky. The area I was in was so open that I was able to see a clear split between the night sky in the east and the sunset in the west. No doubt, it was one of the most beautiful natural wonders I've ever witnessed. Once it did get completely dark, the moon illuminated the landscape with a subtle blue glow. I avoided night walking the best I could throughout all of the other areas of the walk, but this area was an exception. Cars seemed to stop driving through around 7 or 8 o'clock, leaving the road mostly to myself. I honestly don't recall even seeing or hearing any animals. Unless the occasional car did drive by, I was able to walk without using my headlamp, utilizing the natural light cast by the moon.